Vijit sir? Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you, sir. So, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Abhijit sir. I welcome Dr. Abhijit Kulkarni to for this session. As I had already introduced, I'll again give a brief introduction of Dr. Abhijit Kulkarni. He is working as scientist at Honeywell Automation. I think Honeywell Technologies, right, sir?
Right, yes.
Yeah, and he's currently working in aerospace area in the field of magnetics and power electronics. And he did his uh, BTech IIT and MTech and PhD from ISC Bangalore. Right, I had specially requested him for this session on magnetics because, I've been working in this power electronics field, and I know that magnetics is such a topic or such an area where very few people are working. Many of the researchers working in power electronics area either tend to, sometimes ignore this uh, parameter, or maybe this thing, magnetics, or sometimes we do not focus much on this. So I think this session will really help us all understanding what is the role of magnetics in power electronics or power electronic converters, how it affects, what are the norms, etc. Because uh, it is like as the previous experts also said, it is a very important thing that you need to consider and take care while designing your power electronic converters. So I welcome again Abhijit sir, and sir, I request you to start your session. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Harshal, for the nice introduction. And you have also summarized well regarding the importance of magnetics. So today's presentation, the idea is we will look at both very fundamental as well as how those aspects are connected in electric vehicles. So it will be not just purely from the electric vehicle point of view, but also from extreme fundamental point of view. How do you actually design a physical inductor and a transformer? And with them, if you don't design properly, and also where all in the electric vehicles they are needed, and how the design really changes depending on where they are used and what is the operating conditions, right? So this is something which is kind of applicable in general, as well as we are trying to look at from the electric vehicle point of view. Okay. So the presentation is kind of organized like this, where firstly we will look at the inductors and transformers, their role in power electronics, and how do you design them. So the design typically involves not just simple design, but you also need to have the construction, because it is not something like you design, okay, this is the semiconductor device ratings that you want. So what you do is you go and purchase the particular semiconductor device. But here, it is possible to some extent, but usually when we talk about electric vehicle type of systems, we are looking at custom inductors and transformers. So we have to look at the construction of these components also. So this also gives you an advantage, like the complete design is in your control, and you know exactly what you're doing. So that way, it is very important in EV systems that we need to have very high efficiency. So it is possible that by careful construction and being aware of what you're doing, you can actually achieve much better efficiency in the overall system, where a big reduction in the efficiency is contributed by the magnetics. So we will see how all of this fits in electric vehicles, and what are the current trends, what are the industry trends. We will have a generic discussion on all these things. Okay. So as you have already gone through many of the talks in this session, and also many of you would be already aware, the major power block sets that electric vehicles consist of are, you can say, three things. One is, of course, the source. So what are the sources? The battery banks. So battery banks are the main energy source which will drive the motors that are used in the EVs. So there will be a power converter that interfaces the batteries with the drivetrain. So that is one particular aspect. And we also need the charging of the batteries. So the other power converter that are there in the system are the charger. So it can be a fast charger, it can be a simple onboard charger, or it can be a wireless charger. So depending on the type of the EV, we can have all of them or some of them, right? Some EVs may have both fast charger and wireless charger, but some may have only fast charger and so on. So the overall design involves not just the power topology here, but also the other passive elements, right? Now the question is the magnetic design critical in electric vehicles? Can we just go and get some, so basically where we need magnetics, we need it in filters. Let us say for the fast charger, we are using some high power DC to DC converter. And in that we need definitely some LC filters, right? So we can get some inductor there and place it on the power converter. And also, let us say for the drivetrain, can we just have some, if we need, if let us say the motor windings are not sufficient to reduce the ripple, so can we just get some off-the-shelf inductors and place it? You cannot really do that because, as you know, in any power electronic system, what are the different components? You have the semiconductor devices and you have the passive elements. And usually the volume and the weight of the power electronic converter is mainly affected by the magnetics. You would have seen bulky transformers, bulky inductors, right? The semiconductor devices are just small devices. They don't really contribute to the weight and volume. So in electric vehicle systems, weight is very, very critical. This will have direct impact on the, if you are looking from the coupled inductor model, it will impact the mutual coupling value. Or if you are looking at the transformer based model, then it would actually affect the leakage inductance, right? So that is something we need to decide. So here we need someone is saying something. So here we need to take some of the concepts from air core magnetics design. So whatever we saw was like the traditional magnetics design, but here since we are looking at air core system, it is slightly different. We will have a lot of parametric equations which we need to use to compute these number of terms and the spacing. Okay, and here we might actually require some advanced modeling and simulation tools for better understanding, because it is not so straightforward as we saw earlier. It is always better to have a simulation tool that models the complete magnetic system and see what is the coupling that you're getting and how the power is getting transferred from the charger to the vehicle. Okay. So with that, we come to the next topic, the design and construction of the inductors. Now this is something which is very similar to what we saw earlier. There are some minor differences. Okay. So the as we saw earlier, before the physical construction of the inductor, we need to know a few things in advance. So what we need to know the value of the inductor, whether we need 1 millihenry, whether we need 10 microhenry, so that number is needed, and we need to know the current rating. So these are the high level requirements, and the current, essentially we need to know the current waveform that goes into the inductor. So if you know the waveform, you can compute what is the peak and what is the RMS. But here explicitly we have not mentioned the voltage rating because in an ideal inductor, voltage doesn't really matter. But practically, from the insulation point of view, we need the voltage rating also. So, but that is not very adjust that, and usually it will have much higher voltage rating than what we desire. Okay, and here also the core we need to decide. It's depending on again the frequency. So it can be an iron core or it can be an air core. So iron core is like a generic term. It is any ferromagnetic type of core. And air core is something like there is no core at all. But if the winding of such a thing is becoming difficult, then you might actually use some plastic material or something on top of which the inductor is wound. Okay, so that is effectively an air core inductor. So this is just to show you, probably we should have seen this picture earlier, but we're seeing now. We saw that double E core, right? So this is how it looks like, and when you assemble it, it looks like this. And this white color thing that you see here, it is called as a bobbin, and you would actually put your windings around this bobbin. Okay. So now for the inductor, again we need to decide what is the type of the core and core size. Type of the core again depends on the frequency of operation. So that is an easy way to find out. Next is the air gap. So air gap is the important thing in an inductor design, which was not there for the transformer. And then we need to know the number of turns of the conductor and the size of the wire. So here also size, you might have to parallel the conductors to get reduced copper losses. And the number of turns, again, if it is a coupled inductor, you will have number of turns for each of the winding. But we are looking at only single inductor design now, so we need to know what is the number of turns there. So now the question is, why do you need an air gap in an inductor? So as I mentioned, for a transformer, we don't want any air gap. We want ideally infinite magnetizing inductance. But for the inductor, we need an air gap because that will only help us in having a control over the inductance value. So if you don't put any air gap, then the reluctance of the core is so low that you might have to end up having large number of turns to get the desired inductance value. Whereas a small air gap can help you in achieving that very easily. And also air gap would actually linearize the BH curve. So it will actually push the saturation to a much higher limit. So in the operating range that we see, it is a linear curve, which is definitely better for operation. So now how do we design here? It is a different set of equations. So what we have is, let us say, this is the fundamental equation for the inductor, right? L times current is N times flux. So this is your, you take the d by dt on both sides, you'll have L di by dt is N d phi by dt, which is the voltage equation. So now again, this flux, we are replacing it in terms of flux density. So Bm times AC. So LIP is NBMC. Here, what do we know? We know the inductance value. We also know the current, but we don't know the number of turns and we don't know the cross-sectional area. Bm we know again because Bm is basically the maximum flux density allowed for the core, and if it is ferrite core, we will use like 0.3. Okay, so this is one equation. Next, we need to look at the from the winding point of view. So as we saw earlier, this figure, we had two windings. Now we have only one winding, right, for the single inductor. In that case, this equation just changes into N1 AW1 should be less than AW, right? So that's what is mentioned here. We have just mentioned NAW is smaller than capital AW. So this is the window area. This will again will make it into an equality by multiplying it with the winding factor KW. So we can actually now replace this AW with the RMS current and the current density. So we saw earlier that current divided by current density is cross-sectional area. So that's what we have used here. Now we can again combine equation 7 and 8. And what we get is something like this. You get the AC into AW, core area into window area, which is your area product, is equal to LIP chi RMS divided by BMJ KW. So now, do we know L? We know L. We know the IP, we know the IRMS, because essentially we know the waveform. We know BM because for ferrite, let's say we were allowing only 0.25 Tesla. J is also something known. We would try to limit the current density to certain value, let us say 4 ampere per mm square or something like that. And KW is also known, let's say 0.3, 0.4, whichever. So with that you get the area product, and then we will do the inductor fabrication based on that. But one thing that we missed now is the air gap calculation. So we just selected from this, we can select the core, which is the core required. From the winding, from the current ratings, we can compute what is the wire size required. So now the only thing left is what is the air gap required. So we go back to the original equation. So number of turns is equal to LIP by BMEC. Okay. So the number of turns is anyway computed using this. Now air gap is computed based on the reluctance. So the inductance value is given by N square divided by the reluctance of the core, right? And that reluctance depends on mu naught length, core area, and the air gap. So if you use that, then you will get the air gap equation is mu naught N square AC divided by L. So AC we know now because we have already selected the core. Number of turns we have computed from here. Mu naught is also known.
the constant, and L is anyway given. So with this you compute the air gap. So to implement the actual air gap, you don't really need to keep them physically separate. You can actually use some non-magnetic material in between them, like some cardboard or some tape or something like that, and press them together. That would be sufficient. But of course, the length of that material has to be controlled based on this. So the step-by-step procedure is select a wire size based on the RMS current rating of the inductor, compute the area product from the value of the inductance, current rating, Bm, Kv, allowable current density. Then choose a core that satisfies the area product computed above. It should be slightly bigger than what you compute, not too much big. Small anyway will not work. From the parameters of this core, we have to compute the number of turns required and the effective air gap. So we need to know what is the turns required, what is the air gap, and then you have to actually select the core, purchase the core essentially, and then use an appropriate bobbin, and then wind the inductor. So the inductor can be wound using winding machines. There are different ways to do. You can do manually also, but in industry we would actually give it to big magnetics manufacturing industry. They're there. So here it is not really an off-the-shelf design. You have designed it yourself. What you do is you just give the design parameters to the inductor winding company. So you tell that use this core, use this wire, use these many number of turns, and you pack them nicely and give it to us. So that's how it is done. Okay. So now once you know the design, you need to know the losses, and we discussed earlier considerably on the copper loss, but we also have the core loss. Core loss will be hysteresis and eddy current, and we all know what are these. Hysteresis is due to the cyclic operation of the magnetic core, and as you see, the DH curve is not linear. So because of that, this loss occurs. And eddy current loss is again obvious. The currents are induced onto the core because core is typically a conducting material, and this would interact with the resistance. So you'll have some I squared R losses on the core, which is called the eddy current loss. But for the high frequency systems, when we are using the ferrite type of cores, the eddy current loss is very negligible because the resistance of these cores is quite high. Okay. Now this is something which I had mentioned multiple times: skin and proximity effects. Many of you would be already knowing this, but still it's kind of a recap. So this is, let us say, the conductor, and you are passing current into it. So ideally the current should be completely distributed in this circle. Okay, so this is green indicates that you have equal distribution of current throughout the winding. But now if you keep increasing the frequency, what is called as the skin effect starts to show its impacts in terms of what is called as the skin depth. Skin depth is how much current will penetrate from the outside to the inside. Okay. And it is inversely proportional to the frequency. So higher the frequency, lower will be the skin depth, which means as you go for higher and higher frequencies, the current will be mostly sticking on the outer edge only, not in the main core of the winding. So you can see that as the frequency is increasing, the current distribution from fully green, it is changing. We are having current on the outer side. It is increasing further, and you can see that the current is purely on the outer side. So what is the impact of this? We are effectively not utilizing the wire because most of the current is going only through the outer periphery. which means effectively the resistance of this has increased. And this is what gives rise to the AC resistance which we were talking about. So the resistance here will be equal to DC resistance, but the resistance here will be AC resistance, and the differences can be huge. If this is 1 milliohm, this could be 20 milliohms. So even ratios of 20, 30, 40 are also possible. Okay, so that much higher copper losses you would see here versus here. So obviously here also the heating will be much more and the efficiency will be poorer. Proximity effect is something where two conductors, when they are close, again this problem happens where the current distribution changes. So the current distribution may go only towards the edges of the wire instead of the complete wire. So here also you will have higher losses. Okay. So this just shows the proximity effect situation. As you can see here, things are fine, but as you go closer and deep inside, the current is going only towards the outer periphery. And here, if you measure the resistance of this complete system, because they are anyway connected in series parallel, and finally you will have one connection coming outside. So if you measure the resistance there and then you do an AC resistance measurement, you will see that there is a ratio of almost 27.7, almost 30 you can say, right? Which is a huge number. So it is in
one or two questions here.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Generally, this ratio RAC by RDC, while designing this inductors, we generally keep it up to, let us say, 1, I think, around 1. We take this ratio as 1 or something. So if this is increasing to such a high level, so is it specifically for some frequencies, or is it safe up to certain frequencies, like say 20 kilohertz or so?
Correct. So that depends on the diameter of your wire and the frequency of operation. So this what we see here is the skin depth. So this is the resistivity. You have these constants and you have the frequency, right? So if the skin depth that you are getting is penetrating fully, like the radius of this winding, then there is no problem. But as you increase the frequency, this will start reducing. Then this smaller the skin depth, bigger will be this ratio.
Right.
So what we need to decide is, as this number is going up, we need to optimize this. If frequency we don't have any control, for example, usually that is the case, then you have to go as low diameter as possible so that you get the full skin depth.
So I think this Litz wire are a good option for this.
Right, yeah. But Litz wires are expensive. So instead of Litz wire, you may go with normal wires, which are more, you can parallel them more, if that works.
So using higher this, yeah, lower diameter and multiple wires of low diameter.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. And sir, one more thing I would, I don't know whether you are included in the presentation or not, but I'd like to request you that please give some highlights on toroidal core design as well, if possible. Because like I haven't found any reference or good reference material for toroidal designs, like how to calculate the number of turns, maybe for an inductor or a transformer, toroidal core transformer or an inductor. Generally, yeah. So if possible, please do include something regarding to that.
Okay, I think today I didn't plan on that, but maybe we can have a general discussion towards the end.
Yeah, just
yeah. Sure. So yeah, this kind of completes regarding the design and the loss aspects of the magnetic elements. One thing that we didn't look here in more detail is the core losses, right? And core losses is something which is again very much, you cannot model it perfectly analytically. It is something that is depending on the data that you get from the core manufacturer. And usually they give some curves called as Steinmetz curves. And using those curves, you can actually compute the core loss for your frequency of operation and the flux density of operation. But these days, many people are coming with different approaches. If you see papers on matrix design, there are a number of ways you can actually estimate the core loss analytically without heavily relying on these manufacturer curves. So that is something we need to consider in the design. Okay. And finally, once you do the complete design, what you need to do is you need to characterize it thermally also. So you load it fully to its condition and see what are the temperature rise happening. And if your design is perfect, it would match the theoretical expectation. But otherwise, you will understand that there is something wrong. Right? So that is in the prototype stage of the magnetics. So now we will briefly touch upon the EMI filter aspects. We will see how, in general, like some topics related to EMI filters. So any power converter that you have in the EV usually will need to have some sort of an EMI filter. So typically, if it is a charging onboard charger, definitely it will need to have an EMI filter because you are now interacting with the grid, so you don't want to send the noise that is there in your circuit into the grid, which will pollute the neighboring components. Okay, so that is one aspect. The other aspect is within the electric vehicle system itself, we don't want to have one part sending noise to the other, right? So you will have local grounds in the EV system for each of the power converter. So we don't want current from one part to get injected into the power ground of the other. So we may need to have some local EMI filters also, right? So and these days when we are looking at autonomous cars where in the driverless vehicles, the movement is purely based on the sensors that are there in the car, right? You will have LiDARs, which would actually send the lasers, scanning lasers outside, and based on the reflection, they will actually understand, okay, there is an obstacle which needs to be avoided. And they will use GPS to actually plan out the route, and they will use speed sensors, they will use inertial measurement units. So many sensors will be integrated in the system in the autonomous vehicles because they are your eyes and ears, you can say, which would actually tell you how to navigate the car, right? So when you have so many sensitive circuits in the system, again, you need to ensure that you don't affect their performance using a power converter which is producing too much noise, so that you are actually impacting the performance of the sensors, which would actually result in safety hazard for the EV, right? And also we are using so much wireless connectivity, and there could be wireless connection between the various components. We are looking the battery management systems are communicating with the main controller using wireless systems. So you really need to have a very solid EMI performance so that all the sensitive circuits are not affected, right? So as you know, the EMI filters are for conducted and radiated. So it is about the emission as well as the susceptibility. So one circuit can emit and it may be susceptible from the other circuit also, right? And when we talk about the conducted emission, conducted is something that is really flowing through your wires. It can be differential mode or common mode. And the radiated is something which is not through your wires, but it is through the electromagnetic radiation. But usually for radiated emissions, we can have better shielding. With that, it may be able to, you may be able to control it well. But for the conducted, which you'll have various standards that limit the conducted emissions, in addition to radiated, you need to have the EMI filters. Okay. So the EMI filter, it may be essential just for passing the regulation requirement, but it is actually needed for safety, as well as it will also add to the weight of your system and it may reduce the efficiency. So this is just to give you a brief idea about the differential mode filter that we use. Which a simple LC filter would be sufficient. So differential mode is something the current goes in the forward path and returns through the whatever return that we have. So here this simple LC filter would work. So any noise that is coming from the power converter would actually get going in this path only, and the inductor would offer higher impedance, so it will not enter to the main grid. And any noise coming from the grid side also would be taken care by this filter, which will offer attenuation. And usually you will go with this damper also, because the moment you add an LC combination, you are ending up having a resonance, right? And that is not good. So you need to damp the resonance also. And how do you select the inductance and capacitance? It is basically, it is purely based on the frequency. So let us say the switching frequency is what is contributing to the main differential mode noise. So if you have a 100 kilohertz switching frequency, you might actually want to have this set maybe 40 kilohertz or even maybe 10 kilohertz also. At 10 kilohertz, you would actually get about 40 dB attenuation for 100 kilohertz component. So this is how you do. And again, typically in smaller systems, you would use off-the-shelf inductors with suitable capacitance. But in EV systems, because our current ratings may be higher, we would have to again make a custom inductor also. So again, you need to take into account the efficiency point of view, and the frequency is anyway known. So mainly you need to design it so that you reduce the losses there. Common mode is something which is like you have current is in the same direction from the both signal and return. So it would actually return through a common ground or earthing point, not through this, right? So a simple common mode filter would be like this, a coupled inductor. So you can see that for common mode signal, you have dots in both the sides, so it will offer the effective magnetizing inductance. But for differential mode, you can see that the current would actually flow through this and it will come back, right? So it would actually be seeing only the leakage inductance, which would be small. So these are the simplest common mode inductors available, and you will have to design them again to get the sufficient. So here, when you're designing this, you need to take into account that the leakage is very low. Otherwise, you would be simply adding additional inductance for the differential mode signal. And this is just to highlight the path. So this is the common mode inductor, and if this is the noise capacitor, which would be actually connecting between both the line and return to the common ground, it goes here, and this would be anyway offering you higher impedance so that it doesn't enter inside. Now this is just to give you a simple example of a small power converter, how the common mode plays a role. So you can see this is a flyback converter. I think the dot should have been here. So this is the secondary side. and this is, let us say, the secondary side ground. So there is, if you analyze this circuit or if you just simulate also, you will see that there will be a voltage between this to this ground, and that would be a switching voltage like this. Okay. So what is the problem if you have a switching voltage like this? So every dV by dt here, there will be definitely a stray capacitance. So that stray capacitance would actually inject some current to this ground. So even though we don't want any interaction between this to this, because of this common mode voltage, you are actually injecting some current into the other ground, and that would actually it may impact the other circuits also. So one way is, again, you add a common mode filter separately, or since this is happening within this single topology itself, what you can do is you can actually, so this is just showing you those current waveforms, the common mode current that is going between this to this. And this is something that you miss also in the analysis, because this is like you, for the common mode analysis, you need to really be aware that you are actually doing a common mode analysis and start doing it. Otherwise, you will not see these currents. So a simple way is just to add a large capacitor between this and this. So what it does is it will actually it will be higher than the stray capacitances which are going to the main ground, so that the current from those stray capacitance is diverted to this path, and it flows only in this loop, so that you're not disturbing the other parts of the circuit, and you are letting this current flow into this system only. So these are some of the intelligent ways to handle the EMI problem, especially the common mode. And why this is relevant for EV systems is, by doing this, you are actually avoiding additional common mode inductor and again common mode filter by just adding this capacitor. So we should try to do a proper common mode analysis and identify if you can solve the EMI problem locally, so that you don't need to have an external EMI filter. So that will give you a major advantage in terms of overall weight, right? And again, there are, I will not spend much time on that. You can have active EMI filters also. So what we saw is only the passive EMI filters. You are just using the LNC, right? So you can have some active circuits. So active solutions use amplifiers, and they can actually make the filter size a little bit smaller, but they have their own disadvantages also, because the design will be more complicated and may not be effective at all the frequencies, because now the amplifier that you are using, its dynamics also start playing a role, and if it cannot do, and it will also operate only in a certain frequency range. So in that range, you'll be able to have good filtering, but not at all the frequencies. So that's what is shown here. You have EMI sink, EMI source. Then you have effectively an amplifier which will try to sense it and inject an opposite type of high frequency noise, so that effectively they get cancelled out and you don't see anything here. Okay. So this is just in the electric vehicle system. As I mentioned, the charger definitely needs the EMI filter, and we also will need some local filters for different topologies, and we need proper shielding from one block to the other, so that radiated noise is also not going to the sensitive circuits. Okay. So to summarize the usage of transformer and inductor. So typically in EV, we will use the transformer in the charging, fast charger, or even any charging topology we may require, because you would go with the high frequency link type of topology. And for wireless charging, obviously it is needed. It is an air core transformer. Inductors we are using in filters, obviously. So it is EMI filter or DC to DC converter filter, or we will also need in the drivetrain if the torque ripple is higher. The core type that we go for is usually the ferromagnetic core for conventional usage, and air core for wireless charging, and inductors are usually with the magnetic core. Design complexity, it is kind of low for the inductor, you can say, but it is a bit higher for the transformer, especially for wireless charging. You can see that there are a number of papers on that area, and it is heavily dependent on the geometry, and also it would actually require a simulation model to understand the behavior. And what are the impacts due to poor design? You will have low efficiency, which is common. It will be bulky, also common, and again, you will have an eventual impact on the range of the electric vehicle, because you are losing on the efficiency and you are also making it bulky, so that you are adding extra weight to the system, which would again reduce the range, right? So the current trends, you have the planar magnets and also different structures for wireless charging. So the ultimate aim is to achieve higher efficiency and make everything compact, so that you have better range, better payload capacity. And this is something that is applicable even in the electric aircraft also. And it is even more critical, you can say, in electric aircraft than in electric cars. So with that, I think we have some 15 minutes for question answer sessions.
Sir, what is the difference between coupled inductor and a transformer?
Yes, so coupled inductor is essentially an inductor in the sense. So what is an inductor? You need to offer certain impedance to the signal, right? Whereas a transformer is not really not an impedance device. Transformer is only to convert the voltages and currents to different levels. And in a coupled inductor, so this is the coupled inductor, the operation will be, each will handle separately. So let us say if this is active, this will be active for a certain part of the cycle, and this entire thing can be operational for a different part of cycle. Whereas for transformer, both have to operate simultaneously. Okay, so that it is only about the voltage transmissions, and the net the inductance, the magnetizing inductance that you have is not critical. You actually you don't need to have a control over it. You need to have it as low as possible. But here the magnetizing inductance itself is your inductance for both. So that's what is the critical design element. Here this is not the critical design element.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sir, what is the how this this PWM techniques and modulation techniques and efficiency are related in converters in EVs, sir?
Modulation techniques and
efficiency of the EV usage, sir.
Okay.
They are related. How they are related?
Correct. So let us say you are using a charging topology. So this is the high frequency transformer based dual active bridge topology used for charger on the electric vehicle, suppose. Okay. So modulation, here we mean by the modulating of these devices. There are different ways to do it. One way is, if we, let us say, give some phase difference between the modulation between these two, or let us say you, instead of square wave here, you use a quasi square wave type of modulation, we would actually end up having soft switching for these converters. So that soft switching means your switching losses are practically very small, right? So that would actually help you in increasing the efficiency. So that is from the charger point of view. From the drivetrain point of view, let us say you have the inverter that is feeding to the motors, right? So there also you can use, conventionally you can use just the sine triangular pulse width or the space vector modulation. There it will, the efficiency is fixed. I mean, for that modulation, that much only efficiency you can get. But there are certain modulation methods called bus clamping, where for certain period of the fundamental, you will not switch, let us say, you will not have high frequency switching. So in that case, you are again reducing the switching losses, but that would have a negative impact in terms of torque ripple. So there is an optimization there. So the modulation method definitely plays a direct role in the switching losses, and that is helping you to achieve higher efficiency for the drivetrain inverter and also for the charging topology.
Sir,
Yes.
stay on the same slide. If my inverter part or any of the switch is working with highest frequency, suppose I am using some another material like carbide, silicon carbide material devices, they are operating even at higher frequency rate. So I would like to know only one point, whether if we are operating at highest range of frequency, all the topologies, design, materials of peripheral devices, even EMI filter would remain same, or we have to go for something else.
In terms of material, you're asking? Or
EMI filter, material, design, topologies, or we need to change it because.
okay, so if you are going for these wide bandgap devices like silicon carbide or gallium nitride, and you are really switching at very high frequency, for example, what happens is the magnetic element, let's take for example the this high frequency transformer also has to operate at maybe 1 megahertz, right? So at that 1 megahertz frequency, clearly we saw earlier that the skin effect and proximity effects can be very significant. So to a certain level, you can, so the only way to reduce those effects is using, as we saw earlier, let's say Litz wire or multiple paralleling of the wires you have to do. But that activity may actually end up in you having a bigger transformer. You may not be able to fit that in the given size, right? So then you may actually have to reduce the frequency to a certain level so that the transformer can also be done to an acceptable size. So you should not always think that going as high frequency as possible would continuously keep reducing the transformer size. It's not possible because these non-idealities will start playing a role. So we need to seriously consider the loss calculations and then design the transformer. So I hope that has answered your question.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions from participants? Sir, I would like to just request you that, I mean, I have that question that toroidal core design, like, I have got certain notes for this thing. Even books or certain material is available for the design of double E cores or maybe pod cores. But design for toroidal cores is not available. So can you please guide me, like, where can I find those things or, on that?
Sure. So toroid core is something which is typically used in low power systems only. Okay. So toroids, you will not see big toroid cores in EVs or any other high power systems. The main reason is the manufacturing is easier when it comes to the these type of cores compared to toroid, right? So now, if you are really looking at the toroidal design, as you know, there is no air gap in a toroid, right? So it is
Yeah.
just a standard shape. So the typical design, since it is not part of bigger systems and you don't have much to optimize there, you can only have windings wound in a certain way, right? You don't have too much freedom in terms of design for a toroidal core. So typically what in industry they practice is you have to go to the manufacturer website. They would actually have given you a procedure. Okay, this is the current, this is the energy that is required to be handled by the inductor. So for that energy, you use this particular core. And then once you know that core, you can actually compute the number of turns for that core.
Yes.
Okay, so that is the simplest way that industry follows.
Yeah.
And yeah, please go ahead. You're saying something.
So, it is basically you have to just calculate the energy as we do, energy handling requirement of the inductor as we do in case of this double core inductors. And depending on that, with the help of datasheet, you have to just select the proper toroidal core.
Correct.
And yeah, and second question was the number of turns which we calculate. Will the procedure be same for this double core or and the toroidal core?
Yes, it will be again the simplest way to compute the number of turns is your inductance is number of turns square divided by the reluctance, right? So the reluctance number is also something given by the manufacturer only there. You don't have any control over that. And they give something called as AL value. So you just use that AL value and you multiply that to the to the actual inductance required, and then you get the number of turns.
We can directly get the number of turns.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So and one more thing. Since like in inductor we always keep an air gap in order to reduce the number of turns and
correct.
Yeah. So in this case, in a toroidal core, transformer is okay. Like if we are talking of a transformer, if we just wind up the primary and secondary, transformer will drop on the toroidal core. But what about inductor? Like the issues which we find with inside inductor, in case if we don't keep any air gap. Yeah. So in case of toroidal core also, do we have the same issues like due to absence of air gap? Because we cannot set an air gap in toroidal core.
Yes, we cannot. So we have to again rely on the manufacturer specification only that you cannot increase current beyond this level, and also from that AL value you compute the number of turns, because in the normal way you actually the number of turns is dependent on the air gap and number of turns are interrelated, right? So there it is not so. You have to use the manufacturer data only. But usually what they do is they modify the like composition of that core so that there is some added linearity in the BH curve performance. It will not be pure ferrite, for example. They would be adding some. Yeah.
So this ferrite, this toroidal cores themselves, the materials are modified accordingly.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And suppose in case if I calculate the number of turns, it will be 60, right? And wind up 60 number of turns, and my estimated inductance is let us say 5 millihenry, or maybe say 7, whatever it may be. So if I don't get the exact inductance after winding those many number of turns, usually in case of double turns, what we do is we try to adjust that air gap in order to adjust the inductance ultimately without changing the number of turns, right? So in this case, ultimately we'll have to simply change the number of turns only, either increase them or decrease.
Yes. So if you end up having lesser inductance, you have to do that. But you end up having higher inductance, usually you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. If it's a higher inductance, that is okay. It's always okay anyways. Yeah, but in case of lower inductance, I'll have to wind up more number of turns.
Correct. Yes.
So thank you. Actually, I had this done, so thought of asking.
Okay.
Any other questions from participants? Yeah, ma'am, your X is not properly audible.
Sir, we can use the transformer for high frequency operation. So what is the maximum range of that high frequency?
Sorry, madam, can you repeat it?
They are asking, sir, that what is the maximum range of the high frequency for any transformer?
Okay, maximum range. Usually, again, like as we discussed earlier, it depends on the semiconductor device that we are using. If it is silicon and if it is like a few kilowatts type of power rating, we will not go beyond 10 kilohertz. Sorry, beyond 100 kilohertz. And as your power goes down, you can even go up to maybe 500 kilohertz also.
So they are not audible.
Okay, hello. So yeah, so for it mainly depends on the power rating. So at higher power ratings, even when we talk about high frequency, it is not really so high frequency. So if you are designing, let us say, a 20 kilowatt system, your high frequency transformer may be only 10 kilohertz, right? So that number you have to arrive at, again, system level design, where we compute, we start with a number, let us say.
Again, your voice went off.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'm having a network issue here.
You just said that it may be about 10 kilohertz, and after that?
Let me just give me a second.
Network issue something. It's going bad.
Am I audible now? Is it better?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. So yeah, it depends on the power rating. So if you have a 20 kilohertz type of system, you might only need a 10 kilohertz frequency, 20 kilowatt, 10 kilohertz kind of range. And as your power reduces, you might be able to push it higher. But again, so for the same 20 kilohertz, if you're using a silicon carbide device, you might be able to operate at 100 kilohertz also. So it depends on the material that you're using and also the power levels.
So we have other few questions in the chat box. If you can just go through it.
I think I'm having problem in hearing actually.
Four laws of the transfer.
I'm unable to hear.
Madam, can you write down in the chat box? There is some network issue, I suppose. Can you please write down it in the chat box? I request participants to write down in the chat box.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I can hear now, yes.
Great. So, okay, I think we have, ma'am, I will take your question. Meanwhile, see, we have the 3 or 4 questions here in the chat box. That can you please explain how modification and efficiency are related in detail? If you're already covered up, that's fine.
I think that we have covered.
Okay. Next is to make the converter compact by reducing size of magnetic high frequency is chosen, but is there any impact of increasing frequency on magnetics like core loss heating?
Correct. Yeah, that is a good question. Yes, definitely the losses can increase, but that's what, as we mentioned, you cannot keep on increasing the frequency and try to achieve smaller and smaller. At certain point of time, you will not be able to shrink the size further, right? So that is the answer for that. And How do you design leakage inductance value? So there are formulas available. You can refer to the papers. So effectively, like you need to select a winding arrangement which would actually give you the control over leakage inductance. If you want it lower, then you need to do interleaving. Otherwise, you can go with the standard one. And lot of geometrical details are required actually for that. Okay. Then what is the DC saturation effect? And what is DC saturation and effect of it on motor performance? Okay. So DC saturation, what I understand is, I think they're asking, let's say you have a transformer and there is a DC injection to the transformer. What happens? So definitely in a transformer, if you are, it is supposed to operate at AC signals, and you add some DC there, what happens is the BH curve gets shifted. So that BH curve shifting would actually result in you reach saturation earlier than you are ideally not required to reach there. So once you reach the saturation, the performance is very much different from what you expect. So you will have higher current drawn. So in terms of an inductance, if you see you are injecting a DC beyond what is required, the effect of inductance would become less. It will start more behaving like a reduced inductance. Okay. On the motor performance, so if I have to understand correctly, I think you're asking from the inverter side if there is any DC injection to the motor, what is the impact? So okay, there is some comment. Yes.
Yeah, that is
Yeah, so if there is any DC injection to the motor, obviously it will not help you in any of the torque generation or any of the actual what we need. So it would only impact in the overall, it would actually, I think, have a negative impact in terms of higher current drawn from the transformer, and also if it's a permanent magnet motor, then I think it will start interacting with the flux produced by the rotor, and it might negatively impact on the torque generated. So, but this is something typically doesn't happen. The inverters that are used will not inject any major DC. So I think that's not really a major issue.
next question that we have is the cost only reason for limited usage, the usage of med glass cores in inductors and transformers, or there are any other technical reasons? Dr. Prasid Trivedi has asked this question.
Okay.
Sir, I think not audible.
This is something purely application based. I don't see any technical reason for that.
Abhijit sir, can you hear? Am I audible, sir? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. No, there is no technical reason for this. It's purely based on the application and cost. That's it.
I think the last question, Ms. Kantimati has asked it. If the frequency of transformer increase, core loss may increase. Kindly clarify this.
Correct. So core loss is basically one is the hysteresis loss, right? That is the major component. So as the frequency increases, you will go through that hysteresis loop more number of times. And every time you pass through that hysteresis loop, there is a power loss. Okay, so higher frequency would actually increase the loss. And if you see the empirical equations which are there for the core loss, it will be frequency to the power 1.4, 1.5, something like that. So obviously it will increase with the higher frequency.
Yes. So, any more questions from the participants? I hope all the questions are answered to your satisfaction. Participants, any more questions? Yeah, any more participants? I think, sir, yeah, it is done. So I think we stop here, stop our session here. So, sir, I'd like to thank you for your time and for the wonderful session on the magnetics for power electronics, specifically for EV. This was really a nice session, and all the participants have gained very good knowledge regarding this magnetic design and the impact of magnetics. I thank you again, sir, on behalf of the Electrical Engineering Department, Government Engineering College, Valsad, for taking out your precious time and giving us such a nice session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. It was a good experience for me also. I hope it was useful for everyone.
Yes, sir, it was really very useful. And we'll be keeping this session recorded on YouTube as well, sir. I'll share you the link. Actually, there was an issue today while streaming the session live.
Okay.
For some reason, got disturbed in between. So we will again, remodify it and properly again upload it and share you the link as well.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you can leave now, no problem.
Okay.
I'll just instruct the participant for the next session.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, so participants, with this, our first session has ended here. The next session is by Dr. B.G. Fernandez, IIT Bombay. You all know him. He is a professor in Electrical Engineering Department, IIT Bombay. He will be joining sharp at 12:45. He is very punctual about time. So I request every one of you not to be unnecessarily late in his lecture. Please join sharp at 12:45.